Hi, I'm Greg Hunt and welcome to No Disputing That. I created this podcast to give you an in-depth look into the world of mediation and arbitration. Each episode I'll be having a conversation with one of the most renowned names in the field, plus some you may not have heard of yet. We'll cover a wide range of topics from ADR to other areas of the law and life in general. So get ready for a unique blend of thought-provoking discussions, plenty of laughter and occasional audio slip-ups. Welcome to episode 20 of No Disputing That, which happens to be the season finale. In this episode, I'm speaking with Noam Ebner. Now, Noam is known for his work in the fields of negotiation, conflict resolution, and online dispute resolution. He really is a global expert, and I've been wanting to save this episode so it's the last one in the series. It's packed full of really, really good insights from Noam. And I hope you enjoy listening to it. And I look forward to recording season 2 shortly. Listen to the end and you can hear how to get in touch. And if you've got any ideas for season 2, then please let me know. In the meantime, here's Noam. Good afternoon, Noam.
Hello there. Great to see you.
How are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Thanks for popping along and taking part in the show today.
How could I refuse?
Well, look, I wanted a proper big name in ADR to finish the series, or as you would call, probably finish the season. And I thought, well, who better than yourself to do that? So I'm really, really chuffed to bits that you've taken the time out today, and you're going to be on the show. I'm really, really pleased.
Well, Greg, I'm practicing letting people say nice things about me without correcting them, but you're stretching it.
Well, look, in honor of you today, I'm wearing a hoodie with California on it.
As close as you can get to my side of the pond. Ooh.
I've got a copy of your book.
Perfect.
Star Wars and Conflict Resolution, There Are Alternatives to Fighting, which I have started and I'm enjoying. You can see I'm currently on page 19, so I'm not massively into it so far, but I am very much enjoying it. And I also found this. My 3 children are all now adults. One's just left home properly, and I've got twins who are 19 and they're just starting their second year at uni. And one of the twins has got this book which he's left at home. Oh, can you see that?
Yes, I can't see the title, but I think it's is that the ultimate Star Wars timeline?
It is. Yeah, it's very ultimate. It's quite a hefty volume. You've read it then, have you?
I I used to have it at home before I had to make decisions of how much I can pack and take away with me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it's here and not at university in Liverpool.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, look, brilliant to have you on. I just think what I would like to do today is just have a chat, really. Yeah. No sort of preconceived questions or anything like that. Let's just see how we go. We've not met before, which is unusual for me on the podcasts. I've normally met over the last 25 years or so, whoever's on the podcast with me. Although I do think we might have met, but I'm not entirely sure. Did you ever go to Cedar in London?
No,
we didn't.
No. And I think that we've never met. Your name has always been all about the airwaves, not only through your podcast, but through just other ways in which professionals are mentioned and present in our new online place, and how lovely to bring us together. But if if we're just going to have a chat and we don't know each other, then it can't all be about me.
Oh, okay. Well, feel free to ask me any questions. Okay. Let's put that rule in place. You can ask me whatever you like. I might not answer it. I might be a political answer. But no, I'm no good at politics, actually. I could never be a politician because I'd just tell the truth and I wouldn't last very long.
It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah. Very tricky. Yeah. So, would you like to? I mean, you're a well-known name to me. You'll be a well-known name to many people. But for a lot of people listening to this podcast, we get listeners all over the world. They might not know who you are and what you do and what your background is. So that might be a good place for you to start.
Yeah, it's funny. If any, at this moment I'm a bit tongue-tied because anytime anyone asks me like who you are and what you do and where you're from, sort of like a dozen answers rush to the forefront and get log jammed
Mm,
in the mouth. And I just wait and see what comes out.
mm,
So I guess I could start sort of from the technical bottom line of like what my what my day job is.
mhm,
I'm a professor of negotiation and conflict resolution at Creighton University. Creighton University is in Omaha, Nebraska. More or less, if you toss a dart at the United States and hit a bullseye, you
mhm.
would more or less hit Creighton University. For
Okay.
those who are not familiar with either Omaha, Nebraska, or any of the 10,000 or more institutions of higher education in the United States. We have a master's program in negotiation and conflict resolution at the university. Um I've I played a role in that larger program. Particularly, I played a leadership role in the online program of that master's degree that we set up about 14 years ago.
Mm.
Um, and that's how I connected with Creighton. So I actually connected with Creighton long before I lived in the US, and from out of Omaha, it's all been online. So that's sort of part of the what do I do and where I'm from. I'm professor in Omaha, not from Omaha.
Yeah, that's a better explanation than I normally give. My kids tend, when they're asked what the dad does, they've always said, "Oh, he goes places and drinks coffee." That's pretty much it. Yeah,
I know, and let me guess that if they're pressed, no, but like, what does he drink coffee about?
yeah,
They'd say something along the lines of what my family says to me. They say, "Wait, so remind me what it is you do again. I know you're kind of like a lawyer, but not really, right?"
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so in addition to being a professor but not fully there, I'm also a lawyer but not really. Or in other words, my professional background is in mediation.
Hmm.
Um, I first started practicing over 20 years ago. I was living in Israel at the time. I studied mediation in law school. Afterwards, and immediately knew that this is what I wanted to do.
Mm,
So right after law school, I practiced law enough to pay the rent and enough to have a lawyer's license that I could hang on my mom's refrigerator. But essentially, I had decided to go into mediation, and so I trained professionally and more and beyond. And then I just started doing it and have largely been doing it ever since. Is
yeah.
that the route? Is that the route you took?
No, mine was slightly different. I started my ADR career when I
Mhm.
was 25. I'm
Mhm.
not a lawyer. I've never done any legal qualifications. I come from the north of England, and I'd moved to the London area because my wife is from down here.
Uh-huh.
And I got a job at the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators.
Mhm.
And I was an admin clerk, so I was administering
Mhm.
sort of mainly consumer arbitration type disputes. And so it was arbitration really that was the
Yeah.
kickstarter for me. Although I've never formally become an arbitrator, because I don't feel that's what my personality is. My personality is more about mediation,
Yes.
and sort of working with people and helping people rather than issuing decisions.
Mhm.
And it was only so that was 95, and it was only in 2000 ish that the institute started to actually do mediator training.
Yeah.
And I was given an option: do you want to train as to be an arbitrator or a mediator? And me being me, I sort of blagged my way onto both. Um, and I didn't like the arbitration, but I loved mediation just straight away. It just felt natural. It felt so, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say easy, but it just felt natural for me to do, to follow the process, but get on with people and help them to move. to somewhere where they can find a solution. And then I moved to Cedar a few years after that, and
Right.
are all about mediation.
Right.
And it was a great place to be if you want to be a mediator.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, mediation has been my own personal sort of way forward into ADR. But
Yeah.
actually, as a business, Hunt ADR, my business,
Yeah.
we do more arbitration than anything else.
Hmm.
So I sort of wear the two hats, but
Yeah.
slightly in a different way because I'm not an arbitrator. So I run arbitration services, but I
Right.
also practice as a mediator. So
That,
slightly different route and no legal qualifications whatsoever anywhere down the line.
and that's then the amazing thing about this field area or business, depending on, what you call it at any given minute.
Mm,
There's so many roots into it and so many different ways to practice it.
mm, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I know that your one of your passions is ODR.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I I I was back in oof, around 2001, something like that. I was still at the Institute, Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and we launched Europe's first ever online arbitration scheme,
Hmm.
and it was with Ford Motor Company.
Uh-huh.
And the idea was that Ford wanted people to start buying cars online and not going to the dealership.
Right.
And because it was an online transaction, they needed an online dispute resolution process. And we came
Hmm.
up with this arbitration scheme, which was really good. And it got me loads of trips all over the place,
Right.
and lots of trips to Brussels, but lots of other places as well. Got me appointed as the UK's expert on ODR by the British government.
Hmm.
Now, if you think back
Okay.
to 2000, 2001,
Yeah.
nobody was an expert.
No, but if you knew anything, you were more expert than anyone else, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think of all the job titles I've ever had, it was probably the most misleading one ever. No expertise at all, just literally knew it existed.
But that's all it was.
Yeah,
And you were expert by virtue of being one of the people making it happen.
yeah, yeah. So how did you get into the
Uh,
ODR side?
So there were sort of several things that came together. One of which is that since I was living in Israel at the time. I'm originally from the United States. I moved to Israel when I was young, spent a few decades there. Um, and as I studied mediation and got into mediation in some of the broader world of conflict resolution, I realized that so much of what was going on in that world was going on outside and beyond Israel's borders.
Hmm,
And so uh, part of this was my desire to find an area of sort of that had a natural proclivity to being done, discussed, uh, conceived online. By natural tendencies, the people who were into ODR were also naturally online for
hmm,
their dispute resolution, but also, more in spirit as well. In addition, when back in about 2000 or so, maybe a little earlier, I started familiarizing myself with online communication platforms, instant messenger or instant messaging of different types and email, um, and and it just blew my mind, thinking ahead and realizing this is where the world is going, and this is a new space in which going to be um, we are going to be acting, we're going to be striving, we're going to be hoping, we're going to be everythinging,
hmm,
and we're going to be negotiating and mediating and trying to make our plans come true in all sorts of different ways. So we're going to bring all of who we are online, and yet it is so different, and each medium is so different, and some of these media are really very different from everything we had known before in interpersonal communication. And I was fascinated by how that was going to happen, and particularly how we were going to fight and how we were going to make up online.
Yeah.
And so as I got into that, I discovered, that it turned out there was a field that was actually looking at that. Originally, I sort of, I looked at it through communications, and I looked at it through, through whatever. There were only like loose threads uh, leading to it, until I found that there was a subfield called online dispute resolution. Uh, it was really just starting to develop. Um, a lot of it was just people with a kooky idea, kind of not quite working out of their mom's garage, but you know, one step ahead of that.
Yeah.
Um, and that's when I hooked in, and again, for me, that offered an opportunity to both deal with something that fascinated me and also engage with a wider, you know, gang of people who shared the same interests, or an epistemological gang, however you want to put it, all over the world. And that was, over 20 years ago, and I've been doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and just is your involvement in that being um more on a technical side, or is it more are you involved as someone who's a practitioner telling other people what you need as a practitioner, or have you developed some of the technical knowledge as well?
So I'm not a technologist.
Mhm.
Um, I couldn't code my way out of a box. That's not my role in it. Of course, I wish I could do a little more. I can't, but I'm fluent enough to be able to speak with the technologists when they're kind enough to keep it simple for me.
Yeah.
Um, my role in this, well, I had different roles, or different connections. I did practice it just as a practitioner. This expanded my ability to work with people around the world, for any reason. It could be just, two of my mediation clients, but one was away on a trip.
Mm.
Or it could be, two divorcing clients, only one was on a different continent. And gradually it just became a thing unto itself.
Mm.
Why not? Just because we can, if it suits parties and it works for them.
Mm.
So parties could be, next door neighbors, or they could be companies on different sides of the world, but they would be able to engage through these methods. But what I focused on myself, in a world, the ODR world, that has technologists, and it has others. It has technologists, it has mediators, it has people with legal background and foci, courts. I mean, there are all sorts of ways into the world of ODR, particularly nowadays. My interest was always just that thing I said right at the beginning. I'm into humans,
Mm.
and I remain fascinated by the human side of all of this,
Mm.
and uh, how we bring ourselves online, and particularly when we're thinking about negotiation and mediation, we're thinking about two processes that, when we talk about them, amongst ourselves as practitioners, or when we teach about them and explain them soon, we're talking about deeply human processes, in which I know that they're often taught in law or business schools, but they have nothing to do with the discipline of law or with the discipline of business. They have everything to do with the discipline of how people engage with one another, speak with one another, and trust one another or not, communicate with one another or not, put themselves out there or do not, and hopefully get what they want or map out a new future together. Those are deeply human endeavors. And then when you consider taking that online, or let me backtrack a bit. You certainly, any mediators who are listening to me know exactly what I'm talking about when you sort of think about the room, right? You think about the mediation room and everything that can happen in there,
Yeah.
right? Whether you call it the magic of mediation, or just you think of those charged interactions, whether they're charged angry interactions or charged resolution interactions,
Mm.
um, how deeply human they are. And then thinking about the online, as particularly as we were thinking about it back then, as this cold, somewhat sterile environment, um, in which you might be limited to text, or you might not be. But there are all sorts of constraints. Um, how do humans interact there
Mm.
and still manage to maintain, replace, or perhaps increase the essential humanity of the interaction.
Mm.
So that's my area of fascination. I know it doesn't fit neatly, onto a business card,
No,
but
it doesn't, but it's so important. It's something I actually are very interested in,
yeah,
again, from a mediator's perspective. And it really came home to me in the early days of COVID,
right.
because until COVID, we couldn't train mediators online in the UK. We could only do in-person, face-to-face training.
Mhm.
And then COVID came, and then I had a course I had to cancel.
Right.
And I said, oh, you know what? Why don't we put it online? And there was a little bit of aggravation within the industry, and the Civil Mediation Council went in favour of doing that at the time. But it was all new. It was new for everyone. And that was challenged. And in the end, we were allowed to put the course online.
Yeah.
One of the big things that I was concerned about was this whole humanity side of it. How would I,
Mhm.
as the teacher, be
Right.
able to teach those people skills and those human skills, and get them out of the delegates, the candidates, in a way that by the end of the course, they were doing recorded Zoom role
Right.
plays for
Right.
assessment as mediators and still be able to have the same quality as if we were doing it in person. And I thought at the first few courses, I thought, well, it's not quite the same, but it's worked. I think we've managed it. And then the more I did, I didn't see any difference. I can
Yeah.
honestly say, doing it online and doing it in person, and I know that everyone will say you can smell the fear in person, and you can, look at people's body language better, and you can look around the room and see people better and all the rest of it. But actually, I can genuinely say, hand on heart, that I now don't really see a lot of difference. The only difference I see as a trainer, not necessarily as a mediator, but as a trainer, is it is a bit nicer to meet people in person. And we did a lovely course in Belfast a few months ago, and we all went to the pub afterwards and had probably too many pints of Guinness. And you
Right.
can't do that on an online
Right.
course. But actually, everything else, all the other dynamics, once we got over oh, this isn't as good as if it was
Right.
in real life, which it
Right.
still is.
Right.
Um, Actually, one of the arguments I put forward to people who are skeptical, was when someone does a UK Civil Mediation Council accredited mediator training course,
Mhm.
they're assessed by video.
Uh-huh.
And I said I would challenge anyone, if I send you two videos, you would not be able to tell which person was trained online as opposed to which person was trained in person. Because when they're performing in their assessment on the day, they're exactly the same. There is no difference.
Yeah. It turned out that a lot of the difference was in our minds,
Yeah,
or people's
yeah,
minds, and I like that you spoke about mediation training as opposed to mediation, because so much activity of our field is training.
yeah.
At times much more training than actual mediation, and
Mm,
at different times in different periods in different countries. We're all familiar with that. Um, but mediation training, just like mediation itself, is a deeply human experience, leaning
mm,
on deeply human elements. It's
mm,
not. It is not just another. Okay, everybody. I'm going to stand up here on a lectern and and read my notes to you, and you're all going to summarize them. That's not
mm.
how a mediation course works, right?
No. Mm,
So really, in this, in some way, the medium is actually the message. And you know, a lot of people before COVID resisted the notion of online mediation or online mediation training, of
mm,
course, and a key to this resistance was exactly as you say, right? Whether you can't smell the fear or see the sweat or read body language, but and there were all sorts of other things that people would say. about, the bubble. You
mm,
can't form the bubble or see the bubble. Um, there's something about the vibe. They would say all sorts of things. It's funny how particularly, you'd get, and I spoke to a lot of people since I was coming from the world in which online mediation or training are possible. I
mm,
asked a lot of people who showed resistance. I asked them about it, and it's interesting how many of them, even those who are, really highly cognitive people who approach things from a rational perspective, and prefer logic over other forms of knowing, and would in the end resort to sort of these fuzzier words
mm,
in trying to describe why you can't, or why I don't, and uh and so I actually, I started to take notes of what people
mm,
were telling me. And at the beginning of COVID, I wrote this. I wrote most of it before the beginning of COVID. I had to write it again after the beginning of COVID because everything had changed. I wrote a book chapter called "The Human Touch in Online Negotiation and Mediation," and it appeared in a book that was edited by Ethan Katch and Dan Rainey and Mohammed Abdulwahid. That's on ODR theory and practice. It's like it's the book, or the handbook on online dispute resolution. Um, and what I realized was that people were telling me all of these things that they couldn't do, and they all sort of boiled down to I can't bring the human touch online. Whatever it is that people meant by it, that's sort of what it seemed like. But there was also another undercurrent in all of these conversations, and that is that beyond why people thought that it couldn't be done, there was also another tone, either upfront or an undertone of, I don't want to do it.
mm,
and and the I don't want to do it, when I was able to program, the ability to peel back, to peel the onion depends on, on your relationship, or how, how the conversation is going. But every time I was able to peel it back, it turned out that the resistance was less about what you can or cannot do online, and it was more about the mediator's comfort level,
mm,
in either comfort level with technology, or I'd say comfort level with change. And that's a really deep proposition, that it's much easier to put forth the reasons why you can't do it, or why it's not the same, or it won't be the same, than it is just to say something that's so, fundamentally human.
mm,
Well, I, I like things the way they are, and I don't know if I can swing it any other way. And in general, I don't like change. I'm scared of change. We're all scared of change.
yeah, yeah,
And then, as you say, sort of COVID came and said, speaking for COVID, oh, yeah, um, I don't care if you like change or not.
yeah,
Right? And so it said the same thing, just as you said. So COVID spoke to the Council on Civic Mediation Training, or
yeah,
pardon me for not remembering the name, and said, like, okay, so you think training shouldn't happen online? I don't care. Are you going to stop training, or are you going to allow training online? And just like everybody else in the field of mediation, and everybody else in the field of mediation training, um, and in most professions and most occupations, across the globe,
mm,
everybody said, okay, and and made the jump. And that's why we're in a different world today.
mm,
Uh, in sort of, from our field standpoint, is
mm,
because now the conversation is less about resistance to change, or the resistance to change isn't the hidden part of the conversation. We can
mm,
really talk about why we prefer X for Y, and the why behind that.
mm,
So we can really talk about what's better for, what media might be better for what process.
yeah,
But it's not about, I'm just going to say anything negative about it because I don't want it to change the way I do things. So conversations are really different nowadays. Have
yeah,
you have you experienced that?
yeah. And I think when before COVID, um, my view on ODR was that it was part of the overall toolkit.
Hmm.
And some people, normally technical experts, disagreed with me because they were trying to push the development of the technology of
Right.
ODR
Right.
rather than the practice of mediation. And as a mediator, it might be right to use some of the ODR technologies, but also to have an in-person element as well.
Right.
And for me, it was just about knowing what your tools are. And I mean, I say to people in training, we're giving you the tools, you've got to apply them in the right way. And remember, you can pull something out. It's a bit like learning to drive.
Hmm.
If I learned to drive in the middle of summer, and well, it wouldn't be sunny every day in England, but it's sunny most of the time and only rains occasionally during the summer. And then I passed my test in late September, and then I'm on the motorway in October and it's heavy snow. I've got the basic skills. I can drive. I know if I'm going too fast. I know what the distances are. I know I need to check my mirrors and all the rest of it. I've got the skills to adapt to the road that I'm on. And then it's up to me to do that safely and properly so I don't kill someone or kill myself. And as a mediator, when you're being trained, it's the same. You're getting given all the skills, but none of the role plays, even if you think you're the best role play writer in the world, none of them can actually properly recreate a real life situation.
No, of course not.
And so you've got the skills and you've got to apply the skills. And where I found there was a big hole, and I did my best to address this with mediators and arbitrators in the early months of COVID, is just something like I probably did about 20 or 30 sessions with groups of 3 to 6 mediators and arbitrators on
Yeah.
how to use Zoom,
Yeah.
just giving them a tool, giving them,
Hmm.
so they were great mediators, they were great arbitrators, and now they were in a world where they were having to do things online or not have a job, and they didn't know how to set up meeting rooms.
Right.
Simple, bog standard, simple stuff like that. So adapted by giving them that extra skill. And
Hmm.
now, of course, the feedback I'm getting from those people who did those sort of very simple courses was, thank God I did that because I do it
Yeah.
all online now.
So you saved their practice in the moment, and you've also transformed their practice
Mm,
for how they're doing it. It's interesting that you called it like a whole. This was just before COVID. I co-authored an article with Alison Carroll from Northwestern University in the United States about this exactly this gap. We pointed out that um, that mediators don't use any technology in their practice. In other words, the practice of mediation is solidly A, in the room, and B, it's solidly non-technological.
mm,
Now, it's true that a few people do have this added tool of the ability to take it online and to use a communication platform for that,
yeah.
uh, and to essentially replicate mediation online through video conferencing. But other than that, there was no technology in the mediation. Like what technology do mediators have in their mediation room? Like a legal pad, right? Or maybe a whiteboard, and that's
Yeah.
that's the technology mediators had. Uh, and the notion that technology could offer you a set of tools that you might be able to incorporate into your mediation practice was something that was largely ignored by mediators. It
Mm,
was, and they, as a field, mediators knew that there was this field of ODR that was developing stuff like that, but didn't necessarily want any truck with it, right? And the
yeah.
field of ODR wasn't really focused on that at all
Mm,
because they were developing, technological solutions for things that weren't how to serve the mediator in the room.
mm,
To the extent that they were focused on that at all, it was also about, this replicating how can we manage things through video conferencing.
yeah.
So in a nod to your locale now, we called the article "Mind the Gap,"
Ah,
and tried to call to this sort of technological gap that mediators aren't practicing, think it's an ODR stuff, ODR are developing technology but aren't looking inside mediation, and here we are with this gap. That's also changed since COVID. See more and more people developing not only case management systems, which is okay. I mean that's one way, uh, but also tools for use inside the room. And there's so many elements of technology that mediators can use to run, to run either their business or their cases, whether it's a website,
Mm.
a case management system, let's say Zoom for distance communication when they prefer to do that. There are also different technologies that you might be able to use in the room.
Mm.
Technologies for that might help you in generating options. Technologies that might help you find out what precedent has been if you're that kind of mediator and actually and care at all about what other people have done. I personally am not, but
Yeah.
some more along the evaluative.
It would it would be too dangerous for me to do that because I'd probably get it wrong. Be away
I,
away from that. Yeah.
um, it's also a question of how do you see your role?
Mm.
What information are you supposed to provide? There's a wonderful new technology out now for that helps mediators to take notes
Mm.
um, and sort of organize the notes um, as they're working. They can organize the notes and start to organize it into, let's say, if you're in an intake sort of learning about, or the first steps of the mediation process, learning about the case, hearing both sides, you can already start to sort of drag and drop
Mm.
um, things that people have said into the sort of issues column, right? So that when you move on to the next stage and try to identify the issues we're going to talk about, you've already pulled these things out and have a new field to look at. This is ADR Notable, a company who's doing this.
Mm.
Uh, and there are others thinking about more like, sure, mediation is a very human process.
Yeah.
This is where people in the room would say, no, that'll never work because I don't want to lose eye contact with my clients, right? With parties. And admittedly, sure, that's an issue. It's the same issue exists when you're taking notes on a legal pad, right?
Mm.
But it's that same resistance that I mentioned earlier. So there's people are thinking more about technology in mediation nowadays, and I think it's going to infiltrate more easily simply because we've already had this, you know, technological punch in the face
Yeah.
that COVID delivered. So we're all just a little bit more open to, okay, I learned one technology, I can learn another. Or actually, Zoom turned out to be pretty darn helpful, not only, as you say, right, not only in COVID, but afterwards. So maybe it's worthwhile thinking about, what the next thing might be.
I remember back at the beginning of COVID and using Zoom, one of the main reasons that people were saying you can't mediate using Zoom is because there was no announcement when the mediator went back into the room.
Yeah,
And
there wasn't a,
that was
it
like,
wasn't
oh
like
my,
a
oh
knock
my
a
God.
knock on the door. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that was enough for people to say it was no good and you can't use it.
No. Flashing light telling you actually the resistance comes from a different place.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
But you can't think of any creative solution how to step into a room as the mediator and say ding dong, right? we're
I
we're
must admit,
we're creative people,
I did do that.
right? Why not?
And
Or to
but
have a bell,
we
have a
only
bell.
did it. We only did it for the first two sessions, and then we all laughed and
Right.
said, "Don't need to do this anymore, really, do we?" No, we don't.
Uh, because we discovered that it's actually not so terrible if a mediator walks in the room. Parties aren't, telling secrets about, evil things or their secret backups. Or they're not. They see someone enter and they see them anyway. We discovered that people pay a different kind of attention,
Mm.
right? So I notice when you come into the room.
Mm.
I do notice, unless there's a technological reason I won't notice. For instance, if I'm participating from my phone, right? And let's say I don't see all of the participants, I only see one. Um, but we discovered that all of, so many of those things are things that we could just talk to parties about and say, hey, here's this limitation.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to try. what do you say? And they'll say, oh, you don't even need to do that. Or they'll say, sure, let's do that.
Mm,
And it all worked.
yeah, that's good. I think one of the things that I've not really done yet, and it's on my plan to do, but I'm not really sure how to attack it. And it's something that you covered a moment ago when you were talking about ADR Notable. And it's particularly, I think, I do some training at universities,
Mhm.
which leads to the students becoming accredited at quite a young age,
Yeah,
younger than you would normally. I think the average age of a mediator in the UK is still probably mid 50s. And these are students in their early 20s and they're becoming accredited. It would be great to be able to give them a proper steer on the technology side of what they're going to use when they become
yeah,
mediators.
right.
Or, a lot of them, well, all of them actually, the ones that I've dealt with, they are law students. So,
Yeah,
they're going to go into law firms, they're going to become associates, partners, and all the rest of it. They're going to be using all this technology.
right.
But the problem at the moment, of course, is technology moves so quickly. Um, how much do you put in?
Well, I think that the least we can do is to be better than we were a decade ago. A decade ago, if you would teach a mediation course or take a mediation course in university, you would not hear anything about technology.
Hmm.
You wouldn't hear a single word. Far
Over,
less.
over here, you wouldn't hear a single word about mediation.
Well, absolutely. And that's a separate problem. Things have gotten better on that front.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. Yeah.
so why shouldn't things get better on the technology front? So even just even if we have the luxury of having our classes in person, right? Uh, I think that today, if there's an in-person mediation class that doesn't talk, have a session about what's going on in technology in mediation, and two, have one of the role plays be online in some way or another.
Mm,
I think it's falling short in terms of preparing students, not for some remote possibility in their practice, but for the actual likelihood of how they will practice out there in the world. So it really doesn't matter
mm,
what technology you introduce them to. I will say this. I don't get kickbacks from ADR Notable, but I do organize together with Sharon Press from Mitchell Hamlin School of Law. Every year we organize at a conference, at a dispute resolution conference, we organize something called a resource share,
mm.
where we invite where teachers come and they share their teaching resources with other teachers.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, mediation teachers are very generous with one another,
Mm,
and share their favorite role plays or their favorite, and then those other teachers can actually take these resources and use them in our class. So at our most recent resource share, we had ADR Notable. Gary, the CEO, introduced the platform and also offered it to mediation teachers, um, to run simulations using ADR Notable
mm,
for exactly the reason that you said. The students need a touch of technology. I'm sure, of course, that they are hoping that students continue to like the program, continue to use it.
mm,
Uh, but beyond that, it really is. Um, it's sort of the fact that he's offered to do that makes it an easy setup for teachers who don't consider themselves
mm.
technologists,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's an easy entry. All they have to do is make contact with ADR Notable, and they'll help them get
Mm.
set up.
Yeah, that's interesting. Funny enough, I've got a free account with them.
Uh-huh.
I just haven't got round to setting it up yet, but be really interested to be part of that resource share maybe next year.
Do you attend, or are you able to attend the ABA's dispute resolution conference?
I am a member, so I should do. I haven't yet. I haven't yet. I must
It's
admit.
funny. I
Yeah.
attend. I'm not a member.
Yeah, but no, I think one of the reasons why I would find that really interesting is because I'm really interested in how we do things differently in different countries.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if we're honest, mediation and mediation training in the UK came from America,
Right.
but it's now 20, 25 years on, so has developed its own uniqueness. In our typical way that we're not really Europe, but we are Europe, and we're close to America, but we're not America. So we've got this sort of our own version of things. So it'd be interesting to see, from my perspective, how much it now differs from how people train in America.
Absolutely. I mean, mediation. So, some people don't like it when I say this, but mediation is an American export, right? America has exported mediation.
Mm.
It's not, I'm not saying that it's an American creation, okay? Mediation existed long before America existed and long before, any of the, right? It's one of the earliest things in human society.
Almost certainly English.
What?
It's almost certainly English.
It's almost certainly. Okay, you can have it. But did you export it as intentionally and successfully as Americans did?
No,
Well,
no, we didn't. No.
first you exported it to the colonies, right? And then it made its way indeed, and right from those, from New England
Mm,
and the colonies on the coast. Um, since certainly since the 1970s, but maybe earlier,
mm,
we've seen many universities, institutions, private private people set sail from the United States, headed out into the world, and bringing the light of mediation, quote unquote, there, and starting training programs and starting, to generate interest. And this has happened all over the world. That, just as you say, happened in the UK. I went through it in Israel. And it happened in any number of locales
mm,
all across the world. And of course, when you think of it, that is both wonderful and it's also horribly problematic.
mm,
Uh, in that, the dispute resolution mechanism process that was devised to resolve conflict
mm,
in in Massachusetts is not necessarily the same as is required or suitable, whether it's whatever you want, the legal atmosphere, but more important, just the culture
yeah.
of UK, of the Middle East, of Africa, of Asia.
Mm,
And so 10 years on, 20 years on, as you say, of course, natural variants have emerged. I really mean local variants have
yeah.
emerged. It's interesting, to identify, can you identify something that's uniquely British, right? Something uniquely Israeli, something uniquely Ugandan in
Mm,
mediation. Some countries have this, you can see it more easily than others. And then, as you say, it's really interesting to speak with people, back let's call it the mother country of mediation,
mm,
and have those conversations. Like, what do you seem to take for granted that we don't seem to take for granted?
yeah.
What can you get away with in a room that we wouldn't get away with in a room? What do
Yeah.
you consider getting away with in a room that we consider that's just the way people talk,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, and I love all that. And again, going back to the sort of the growth of the use of, keep saying Zoom because I use Zoom, but obviously
Yeah,
other platforms exist. Um, One of the advantages that I didn't foresee when I argued to be able to allow people to train online was the fact that people would be signing up for the course from all over the world. Um, we've had people from Chile, Australia, Hong Kong, China, all over Europe. Um, and funny enough, in December on our next online course, we've got our first candidate who's going to be in Israel
well,
um,
there you go.
at the
Yeah,
time. And none of that would have been possible because in-person training tended to take place in London
right,
or one of the other two or three major British cities. And it was for that reason, it was Brits taking the course or people who live here, maybe
right,
from other countries. But from a training perspective, and of course, when you're a trainer, you take your experiences into your real mediations as well, because you learn all the time, never mind the people who are on the course. Um, all these different perspectives from all over the world about how they do things in their countries, and having to explain to someone from Chile how we deal with empathy
Right.
is so different to how they do. But you don't know that until you're in the situation that you've got someone on your course, and that never would have happened without COVID, and it never would have happened without the sort of birth of ODR as being a natural thing to do.
Well, absolutely. Or it wouldn't have become as widespread because right, training is highly localized, right? When I was doing my own, court certification training in Tel Aviv, let's say, the people who I would be training would be people from Tel Aviv, like, and so my own path was, studying mediation as an import from the U.S. from either teachers from the U.S. or people who had learned from teachers from the U.S. and then developing my own model that was culturally suitable or at least more suited to the Israeli locale and Israeli culture or cultures. Um, and then my next move is when I started training internationally. Um, it, it it both I ran into that same revelation that you described, that all of a sudden, right? I mean, I know the material, but it's not about the material. It's about the different frames through which we describe these things. And it's about the different purposes which these different concepts that we talk about in mediation, they serve different purposes in different cultures. And so we come and say, empathy is important and you need to make eye contact. Okay, right. Well, yes, but why is empathy important, or how is empathy shown and displayed? That can be very, very different across different countries. And when you're teaching, and I'm sure, as you say, you have this in your own room, when it's not just, okay, so I have a room full of folks from the UK and also, a couple of people from Belgium, but rather you have a room of 15 people from 12 different countries. That's when you really start thinking about, oh, hey, what are the assumptions that I've brought into this room? What are and every word you say, you start to catch yourself. And it can be a delightful process because you find yourself taking apart everything you thought you knew, let's say, about the purpose and practice of empathy in mediation, as an example. And you need to take it apart, look at your own assumptions, look at it more broadly, and then figure out how to put it back together and teach about it in a way that's far more inclusive, far more suitable for a multicultural crowd, and far more elicitive of your participants,
It's
because they
the
need
most
things.
important part of the course for me, and I say to people, you can have all the detail in the world about process. You can be the most amazing process person on the planet, but if you can't communicate with people and get them to communicate back to you, why are you trying to be a mediator? It's the most important thing. And what we do, because I've been trained by a couple of different mediation providers. I've done training for 2 or 3 others as well. So when I started doing it for my own business, I thought, well, where did I feel the other courses didn't quite come up to proper high standards?
Mm-hmm.
And they were all great courses. I'm not knocking any of them. They're all brilliant. But the one area which I thought, no, this is the most important area, was this interpersonal skills, people skills.
Yeah.
And I think where everyone else was falling down, and where I thought, well, I'm going to make this our unique selling point, was they had faculty tends to be mediators who can teach or train. And that means if you want to give people a really good understanding, knowledge, experience of how to improve and develop people skills and interpersonal skills, it's not good enough that you're just a mediator trying to tell people why that's important and get them to recognize that. So I only teach on 4 days of the course, and on the second day, I actually bring in a people skills expert.
Mm-hmm.
They do that day. and they prepare the group for the rest of the course, which is all about exploration and getting the information out from the parties, and they specialize in that. So I use a specialist to do that. And of
Wow.
course, it's the only day of the week I don't train, and it's always the day of the week that gets the highest score. And people talk about the most, all the rest of it.
Well,
But
but you set it
very
up that way.
important.
Yeah, I mean, you set it up to be like
Yeah,
the spotlighted and the difference maker, and so
absolutely.
good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And I think it really works. Now I've got to remember this is a podcast recording and not just a nice chat, because we can talk for hours and hours, I think. But we need to wrap up soon, I think. So I'm going to ask you two things.
Yeah,
First of all, what do you see coming next?
that's a big question.
I know, I know.
Coming next for the
Sorry.
world, coming next for dispute resolution, coming next for me.
Well,
You're gonna
maybe let's put it this way: coming next from America to hit the shores of the UK in relation to the development of mediation or arbitration, the
Mhm.
ADR in general.
It's a tricky question to pull an answer to
Mhm,
out of my sleeve, particularly particularly in the sense that I don't. What comes to mind are not necessarily things that are going to happen to America or in America first.
mm,
So let me share a few thoughts. Um, my sense is that the next thing, or the next thing, or the next thing
mhm,
that's going to happen, it's going to be interesting in mediation and conflict. It'll impact mediation, arbitration, court,
mhm,
everything. Is ongoing and accelerated change in people.
mhm,
And these changes will include, how they relate to one another, how they interact with one another, how they communicate. A good friend once told me a while back, he said, you know what, when talking about people, you try to use the word we, not the word they. Try and include, like, as if you're
yeah.
you're not some alien
You're
or
one
something.
of
So,
them. Yeah.
right, so pretend that you're one of the humans. So how we interact,
Mm,
how we um, everything in our own lives and when we come into contact with people. And just I won't give the full spiel of this, but I will say, we've been going through a period of technological development as a species,
yeah.
and as a society. It is not even across all societies, of course. Um, but the pace of technological development and the pace of technological immersion in terms of our experience as humans in this society,
Mhm,
um, is unprecedented and continues to accelerate. I mean, think how many technological platforms you knew how to operate 20 years ago, how many you knew to operate 10 years ago, how many you cannot get along without today.
yeah.
And I mean, it's just a shocking number of changes. Now, of course, my point isn't that we use a lot more technology now than we did in the past. My point goes beyond that and says that when we use technology, technology changes us.
Mm,
And and it changes us as individuals and it changes society. And so um, I've been keeping an eye on this notion of how might people be changing
mm,
uh, in ways that might be quite unexpected and might be sort of, at first they might just seem quirky,
mm,
but they're actually quite fundamental when you
mm,
think of it from a conflict and mediation point of view. So even just changes in the way that people interact with one another, right? Do we sit with each other across a table even when we're in person? And that's the key thing. It's not have we changed when we're using technology. It's right. So Zoom mediation is different or not different than in-person mediation.
mm,
I'm not talking about that. Even when we're at the table looking at each other, right? Have we changed? Are communication styles and skills the same as they were 10 years ago? Are they not? Do we have different distractions perhaps more distractions than we did 10 or 20 years ago, or do we not? If we're living, let's say just as an example, in a more distracted world, as people, we are more distracted, or our attention is being grabbed more often and intentionally by, far more elements than they were. What does that do to our brain? And the answer to all this is that, in any field outside of mediation, you can find research, not any field, of course, in many fields outside of mediation, you can find research discussing actual human change. Part of it is just actual brain change, and some of it is actual, societal change or interpersonal interaction change. And it's really important to think about that as mediators. And the easiest place to look at is to look at yourself. How have I changed in the last 5 years? Of course, COVID threw such a sharp twist into it. Some of it partly because we adopted technology so rapidly, so we became even more immersed. And partly because these changes are not necessarily only due to technological immersion. COVID itself was, is just an easy example of a huge societal shift that came along and changed everything for so many of us. I mean, I think it's changed the way we shake hands, right? Or like you're right. Think about like your desire to reach out to someone or to hug someone. I'm not saying it's not that we don't do it, but do we do it exactly the same or as much as we did 5 years ago?
No.
And I think that when you boil it down to one example, just that one example of human touch, right? Physical human touch, then obviously we've changed. And then you might start to think about, well, what role does human touch, human physical touch, play in mediation or in negotiation? And the answer is, of course, that it does play different roles. There's you can talk about an opening handshake or a closing handshake, and those are the easy. But there's more. There's those times that you think about, should I put a hand on his hand and to show that I understand? Should I lean in? And the distances of how much I should lean in have now changed, and so the message of what I'm sending has now changed. And I think that those are just sort of easy to put out there examples. But our change process as human is accelerating, and I invite anyone who listens to this and to consider, how have you changed over the past 5 years? And now assume that you're a party in mediation, or that a party of yours in mediation has gone through those same changes. How might it affect the process? How do your changes, how do they affect you as mediators? And the answer is that that we're all changing, and that our processes are changing. And I think we do well to be more aware of those.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting point. I've always had a sort of thing I've said to my kids, that humans have never changed. Technology changes, and we become more technologically advanced. But we still fight stupid wars, and we still do all the stupid things we've always done, because we're just pretty much at the same level as we've always been. It's just technology has improved. But I think when you started talking then about how human behavior is changing due to the speed and difference of technological change, it made me think straight away just of how I'm blown away daily by my children, who can multitask much better than I ever could, and who know the answer to everything. And actually, they're generally right. And it's because of YouTube and TikTok and Twitter and accessibility, Google things, and it's all there, and they're taking in all this extra knowledge. And I think you can see I can see a difference in their generation as people, as opposed to what my generation was like. And I think that's because of technological advances.
Right, and some of this is, I mean, some of this you can always say, right? Some of this might be, well, that's how parents always look at their children or grandparents always look at their grandchildren. And that's true.
Mhm.
But some of it might be, just as you say,
Mm.
unique.
Yeah.
And it is technological advances, which I will only add on, like I said. You're right, some fundamentals haven't changed. People are just as willing, to pick up a stick and hit the other
Yeah.
person on the head with it, just as we were 50,000 years ago.
Mm.
And yet there is something about this rapid acceleration that we're seeing now that it's not just a qualitative change in, let's say, resources or in sources of knowledge, but if we would go in and do a brain scan of our brains 10 years ago and a brain scan of our brains today, we would find that our brains are physically different.
Mm.
And I think that when you think about it that way, then the notion that people are changing, I mean, it's right here, right now within us. In some people, it's more pronounced, and between generations, it's even more pronounced. So that's I say, it's always easy when you talk about change to point at a generation that's sort of conveniently younger than you, and that helps. You can look at yourself, and that's a little more tricky.
Mm.
But I guarantee, I'm not a neuroscientist, but your brain is not the same shape it was 10 years ago. And
Mm.
that's really both marvelous and it really makes you think.
Mm.
It can't be that my brain has changed in a number of fundamental ways,
Mm.
and yet I am still the same mediator I always was. It doesn't work that way. The
No.
humanness doesn't work that way.
Mm.
So this is all stuff that fascinates me. I'm happy to hear from anybody
Yeah.
who would like to chip in with examples or suggestions or arguments about this. Yeah,
Excellent. Well, there's an open invitation there.
yeah.
And then, final question: is there anything I haven't asked you that you really wanted me to?
That's a great ending question. No, the answer is no, because I came in here with let's have a chat,
Yeah.
uh, and I can't imagine a better chat.
Yeah.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's been great. Thank you. Thanks for giving up your time. Um, it's been everything I wanted it to be. So I'm really going to hope that, we get some good listening numbers on this one, because I think it's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned from you, and I think this whole question of how we are changing as humans based on the change in technology and the speed of it is
Yeah.
something really to keep an eye on over the next couple of years. And I'm sure you'll be writing a book about it.
Well, oh no, more expectations. Yeah, I wrote an article about it around 7 years ago,
Mm.
and it's ready for not only ready, but I hope to rewrite it. And you're right, maybe it should be a book by now, particularly because COVID not only accelerated everything, but also brought more of this to light.
Yeah.
It's on a shelf. It says projects I need to do.
Mm.
It's a pretty big shelf.
Yeah.
Uh, but yes, I hope to. And when I do, invite me back. I'd like, and I'll tell you all about it. But also, I'd like to thank, if anybody has reached this point in the podcast,
Mhm.
then I want to thank you for your stamina. And thanks for listening.
No, thank you. Thanks very much. See you soon.
Take care, Greg.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoyed the whole of the season. Thank you to Noam, and thank you to all of the guests that have been on the show. We've done 20 episodes. We've had 21 people on the show, and it's been a fantastic experience for me. Better than I thought it was going to be, more fun, but also I've learned so much, and I hope that you have too. So that's me signing out for now. And as I say, season 2 will be back soon. You can get in touch with any ideas, any topics you'd like me to cover. If you think you'd like to be a guest, drop me a line. All the information is in the commentary on whatever app you're listening on, and I will see you soon. Thank you. That's all for today from No Disputing That. I hope our discussions have helped you to learn more about the world of mediation and arbitration. As we come to a close, I want to thank you for listening in and thank my special guests for their insightful advice and ideas. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to leave me a voice message and you might even be featured on a future episode. Until next time, this is me, Gregory Hunt, signing off. Thank you so much for joining me and have a wonderful day.